So I think the last class we spoke about passing the functions as arguments, uh, and we were talking about the functions being the first class citizens in JavaScript. And I also told you guys that it's not common for functions to be like that in every programming language. That happens only in certain programming languages. Uh, when I say that the functions are first class citizens, I mean that the functions can act as any other objects, which means that they can be assigned to a variable. They can also be passed to a function as an argument. But one more thing that can be done to the function is that functions can be returned as a return value from another function as well. What I mean by that is, let's say we have a function called sum, which takes in a comma b, and we can return some value, right, a plus b. And when we do the sum of 10 comma 20, we are basically returning this value. Let's say we create one more function called return something, and we can basically return any kind of value from this function, and the value can actually be an object, array, string, null, undefined, anything. Let's say you return null, and you call this function, you do console.log of just return something function, and let's run this code. Let's open up the console log. We see null here. Now let's say we return an array with 1, 2, 3. We return the array here. Now let's return an object. You get the object here. The point I'm trying to make here is whenever you want to return something from a function, you can return any kind of value. You can return an array, you can return an object, string, null, number, whatever you want. And like I told you, the functions also behave like any other value within JavaScript, which means we can actually return a function as well. Which means let's create a function here. Let's say const run me. Create a function called const run me. And this one will just do a console.log. I have been run. Now let's see what's happening here. I basically have a function here, and within the function I have one more function here. Now, right now, this function is useless because I'm not running it and not returning it. See, if I want, I can run the function like this. But instead of running it, I'm just going to return the function this time. Okay. Now again, observe here, I'm not calling the function. This is wrong. Okay. I do not want to call the function. I just want to return the function as it is. This time, what happens is when I do const result is equal to return something. When I return this result will actually be this function. Okay, this result is nothing but this run me function, which means when I do a result of this, then this thing will run, right? Because like I told, this result is nothing but run me. When I save the file, I'll see this console log. Okay, let me walk through what is happening here. We have defined a function here called return something, which in turn has a function called run me. This function, I'm returning it here. Okay, I'm returning the function from this function, which means whenever I call this function will return this function, which I'm later on running it here. Okay, this result is nothing but this run me function, which I'm running it right here. And when I run this function, then this function body will be run, and hence we'll see this console log to be printed. Okay. Now one more way of returning a function is instead of doing this here, you can just directly return the function here only. Return the function like this. This is one more way. Now again, we spoke about anonymous functions in the last class. Because this function will anyway be stored inside another variable, we do not need to add the name here. We can just remove the name and just return it like this. And this is called an anonymous function because this function has no name. But we'll be returning this function and storing it inside this variable called result, which means this result variable is right now this function. Whenever we run this result function, we're running this function right here. Okay, this is called an anonymous function. And one more way to write the function is, let's say, const runme is equal to this function, console.log, I have been run. This time you can do a return of runme like this. We spoke about this as well in our last class. This is called a function expression, where you've created a function here, which is an anonymous function. It has no name, but you're assigning this function to a variable like this. Why can we do this? Because like I told you, you can assign a string a string array object on all of those things to a variable, just like how you can assign those things to a variable. You can even assign a function also to a variable like this. Okay, and then you can later on run that function using this variable. Okay, this is how we can return anything from a function. So let me give you a more practical example. Let's say we have a function called multiply by, which takes a number, and we return a function which again takes a number, and it returns x into that number. Okay, now let's see what is happening here. We have a function called multiply, which accepts one parameter called number. And in turn, this function called multiply by will return to you one more function. And this function accepts one more parameter called x. And inside the function, because of lexical scope, which we spoke about in the last class, lexical scope is nothing but the inner functions have access to the variables that are defined outside of it. Okay, which means this is the inner function. This has access to the variable called number, which is defined outside of it. Okay, which means this function will basically return the value of x, which is this function's parameter, into number. We'll see how that works. Okay. First, we'll create a variable called triple, and this will be multiplied by of 3. And what we'll do, we'll just say triple of 4. Now, what do you think will be returned, guys? What do you think will be actually be returned from this? Like if I just do a console.log, or if I just do const result is equal to, what will the value of result? Just try to understand what will be the value of result.
Sir, 12.
12, okay. Let's see what is the console log of result. We get 12, that is correct. The reason being, let's see what happens. First of all, multiply by 3, we're calling this, which means num is right now 3. And then we return this function to triple, which means this triple is nothing but this function. Now, when we call a triple of 4, which means we're basically passing this x to be 4 here, and we already know that num is 3, and hence we're returning 4 into 3. That is the result here. Okay, let's try one more example. Let's say const double is equal to multiply by of 2. Let's say double of 3. What will this be, guys? What will be the answer of this?
Six.
That's the correct answer again, because very simple. So basically, we're calling multiply by of 2, which means the number is 2 right now. Like num is 2. And inside this, we are returning this function, which means this double function is now nothing but this function. We're passing double of 3, which means x is equal to 3. Here we're just doing 3 into 2. We get 6 here. Okay. This is how we can use the functions as return values. Okay. This is again a very common thing that you'll be doing in your React projects also. You'll write one function which returns to you another function. Just remember that the functions can be used as any other values. Just like how you use, let's say, an array or an object. You can use the functions also the same way. Like let's say you create a variable and you assign it, you create an array and you assign it to a variable. You can do the same thing in function as well. You can create a function and assign it to a variable. Just like how you can return an array or an object from a function, you can return a function also from a function. And just like how you can pass an argument of array or an object to a function, you can also pass a function as an argument to another function. That is why the functions are called as the first-class citizens, and it's also a very important interview topic as well. They'll ask you, what does it mean when we say that functions are first-class citizens? The answer is very simple. The functions behave like any other objects or values in JavaScript, which means that the functions can be assigned to a variable. They can be sent as arguments to a function, and they can be returned as values from within a function. These three things, they make a function behave like any other value within JavaScript. And also this is not like very common. It's not there in every programming language. Like it's not there in Java, C++, and C, but it is part of JavaScript and Python. Okay. So any questions so far on functions, guys?
No, sir.
Okay, cool. Next, we'll talk about this the concept called callbacks. Callbacks are basically functions which are not which will be passed as an argument to another function, and they'll be run by that function. Let me give an example. Like let's say okay, there is a function called setTimeout inside JavaScript. Okay, now this function is an inbuilt function of JavaScript. I will tell you one small thing. Okay, we had spoken about this thing called ECMAScript long back. ECMAScript is basically the documentation or specification which basically tells you everything that every feature that exists in JavaScript is will be mentioned here, right? Like for example, we spoke about the triple equal to, we spoke about double equal to, all of those things. So basically, this documentation contains all the features that exist within JavaScript. But there are certain things, like for example, you cannot this thing called console log does not exist in this documentation at all. If you try to search for console log, you will see nothing here because console log is not part of the actual specification. We do not see anything that setTimeout also. If I try to search for it here, I get nothing. But then how are these things working then? If these things are not part of ECMAScript, where are they actually coming from?
Sir.
Huh.
Sir, what is bibliography?
Bibliography.
Yes, sir.
Why do you want to know about that now? Is it related to any?
नहीं सर, वो अभी ऐसे देखा ना, उधर लिखा हुआ था bibliography.
Yeah, ये कुछ separate topic ही है, something related to. Yeah, just this is what it is.
सर सर अभी आपने ECMAScript निकाला हुआ था ना सर? हाँ, ये नीचे लिखा हुआ ना, तो सर इसमें लिखा हुआ है
ये वाला
सर, द यूनिकोड कंसोर्टियम। सर ये क्या था?
ये वाला
जी सर।
नहीं, all of these things are related to the teams that work on ECMAScript. So ECMAScript जो बनाते हैं ना, where do they get the other references from? Where do they study before they create the document? वो सब कुछ है इसमें.
Okay sir.
Like if I am part of ECMAScript, if I am part of the ECMA international group, I need to go and research about certain stuff at certain places ना, तो वो सभी यहाँ पर है बस. But don't go too deep into this. The documentation, see, we need to understand what the documentation is, why does it exist. But you do not have to go through this very honestly. Okay. Anyway, so I was saying कि मैं क्या बात कर रहा था? You're talking about callbacks. So I was saying कि if these things, if console log and set timeout are not part of the ECMAScript international documentation, where are they coming from? The thing is, the way JavaScript actually works is, let's say this is the browser environment. I'll tell you in a very simple detail how it works. This is the actual browser. Let's say it's Chrome or Firefox or whatever. This is a JavaScript engine. Okay, this is the main JavaScript engine that we have. Now, this JavaScript engine only understands whatever is there inside the ECMAScript thing. So ECMAScript में जो भी define किया गया है, like all of these things called toString and double equal, triple equal to, greater than, less than, all of those things, array.map and all of those things, they are part of the engine itself. So engine को समझ में आता है. Okay, like when we do const or let, all of those things, engine को समझ में आता है. लेकिन when we do stuff like set timeout and console log, the engine doesn't know what that is. So it'll actually go and ask the browser itself, what is that? The browser has access to many methods like console log and set timeout, which it tells the JavaScript engine how to implement it. Okay, so JavaScript engine doesn't implement other stuff like console log and set timeout and many other things, but the browser itself has an implementation for that written in its programming language. Like let's say our Google Chrome is written in C++. So the implementation for set timeout and console log is written in C++, but JavaScript engine will just go and use them. Which means the set timeout basically is not part of the JavaScript programming language, but it is part of the web. Browser में लिखा हुआ है. Browser tells the JavaScript engine how to execute and implement that. Okay, you don't have to understand all of these things, but the bottom line of this is the console log and set timeout are not part of the ECMAScript specification or documentation. They are provided by the web. The web browser gives you, the web browser is able to help you to use this. Okay, we cannot use this. It's not part of the engine directly. It's part of the web browser itself. Okay. Now coming back to this one, what is set timeout? So set timeout is basically a function which accepts two arguments. The first argument is the function again, which will pass like this. And second argument is the number of seconds after which you want to execute this function. Let's say I want to execute this function after 1000 milliseconds. By the way, this should always be a millisecond. Okay, so we should provide a millisecond, not seconds. Now, what happens here is after 1000 seconds have passed, then this function is executed. Let's add some code here. Let's add maybe console.log. I run after 1000 milliseconds or 1 second. Now I'll hit the save button. Let's see if we do not get it immediately. We get it now. Let's increase this to 5 seconds. And when I hit save, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So after 5 seconds, we see this code to be run. Which means the set timeout is basically a function which accepts a couple of parameters. Okay. The first parameter is a function which will be run after these many milliseconds have passed. Okay. Now this function is called a callback function because it will be called back after these many seconds. Which means this function will not be executed immediately. It will be run after these many milliseconds have passed. And that is why we call it a callback function, because we're calling it back after a certain amount of time has passed. So a callback function is nothing but a function which will be executed as part of another function.
सर
Yeah.
सर जैसे जावा में होता है ये सेट टाइम, ठीक है, उसके बाद उसमें स्लीप भी होता है, इसमें इसमें स्लीप होता है, स्लीप टाइम।
This is like a sleep time only. Now this will be sleeping for 5000 seconds. उसका और इसका लॉजिक वही है ना, उन दोनों सेम काम ही कर रहे हैं ना बेसिकली।
नहीं सर, होता है ना, उसमें जावा में भी था, सेट भी होता था, स्लीप भी होता था, उसके बाद आई थिंक इनवोक भी होता है।
Now what does the sleep thing do? You tell me. What does the sleep thing do?
नहीं सर, सेम जैसे जी अभी सेट चल रहा है वैसे ही चलता है वो भी।
हाँ वही बोल रहा हूँ। हाँ लेकिन जावास्क्रिप्ट में सिर्फ और सिर्फ यही है हमारे पास, we do not have sleep.
ओके सर।
ठीक है, okay. This is how this thing works. So basically, I'll just like repeat one last time. So we have a set mode function which accepts a couple of parameters. The first parameter is a function which will be executed after these many seconds have passed. This is called a callback function because we are calling it back after these many seconds. A callback function is nothing but it is a function which is passed as an argument to another function, and it will be later run by that function itself. That's a callback function. Now, okay, so I'll just we'll take a break of 5 minutes, guys. I'll just bring my notes for the next topic now. We'll meet at 9:40.
ओके सर।
Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm back. Let's start with the next topic. So we have covered the functions ka basic as well as the advanced functions concepts also. Whatever we've learned here, right? We've learned about the callback. I'll just repeat about callback one last time because the next topic is all about array callbacks. Basically, you have a function which is passed as an argument to another function. Now that this function will be called back after a specific amount of time or whatever it is. Like this function will decide when to call this function. And this function is a callback function. Okay, that is what a callback function is. So next, we're going to start talking about the array callback methods. Okay. If you guys remember, we had spoken about, we've already seen how methods work. Like let's say we have a string here, or maybe a description. Okay, so if you want to find out the index of, let's say, the letter H, we do description dot index of the letter H. Okay, this is a method. Okay, this is a method of a string. Let's say we have an array here, and if you want to find, like, if you want to get just this part of the array, okay, we can use array dot slice of 1. Okay, this will give us back this part. If you just do a console.log of this, we get back 2 and 3 because we're slicing it from the index 1 till the end of the array. You know, this is also a method on the array. Okay, just like how we have slice and splice and other things that you've seen, we've even seen dot includes as well, right? Like if you do dot includes of 1, we get back a boolean of true. And if we give this maybe something else like 10, we get a boolean of false. So this is also one more method on the array. Just like how we have the includes and the slice and splice methods on the array, we have a bunch of other very important array methods which actually accept the callbacks. We have seen what callbacks are. Now, because we know what callbacks are, we'll start learning about those methods because they're extremely useful, and you'll be using them very, very often, especially in React. Okay, and this is a very important topic because it's also very helpful for solving programming like challenges in interviews as well. So what I'm going to teach now, learn that very well. Ask any questions if you have, because it's very important for you to understand how these methods actually work. Just to reiterate, just like how we have the dot includes method on the array here, we have many other methods on array which accept callbacks. Right now, dot includes accepts any primitive value, right? But we can also, there are methods on array which accepts the callbacks. Let's look at them. For example, we'll start off with one of the very common ones, which is the for each loop. If you guys remember, I had spoken about the fact that JavaScript has multiple for loops, right? We have already checked the normal for loop, which is the for let I of 0. We have also checked the for off loop. We have also checked the for in loop. But there's one more way you can loop through an array directly, which is the for each loop. Let's say we have a array of numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 1 to 7 numbers within the array here. Okay. Now what we'll do, we'll do numbers dot. The dot ke baad, if you see, VS Code is giving you many methods which we can use. We are going to use the for each method. For each. This is a method which accepts a callback function, which means you can give it a function like this, an anonymous function like this. What happens here is JavaScript will run this function by passing this in every loop, which means the first iteration may JavaScript will pass in the item. Okay, this is the syntax of the callback. What happens is every iteration JavaScript will call this function by passing in these numbers. which means when we use the syntax like this, in the first iteration, the item will be equal to 1. And once the function execution is done, next iteration mein the item will be 2. Next iteration mein item will be 3. Next iteration mein item will be 4. Now, if you look at the for of loop that we have for const number of numbers, if we have this gives the same way. Basically, in the first iteration, number will be 1. In second iteration, number will be 2. Third iteration, number will be 3, and so on. Okay, this is how the for of loop works, right? Now, similarly, the for each loop also works the same way. This function will first run with 1 as the item. After that is done, it will run with 2 as the item, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we do not have to specify we have to start from the first index and the last index. By default, the for each loop will run from the beginning of the array till the end of the array. We'll just do the console log of item for now. We get all the numbers printed out here. Okay, which means in the first iteration, the item will be this 1. In second iteration, item will be 2, and so on. Okay, this is how the for each loop actually works. Now, one more thing is, apart from getting the item argument here, the for each gets back one more argument called index. Index is nothing but the index of the items, which means in the first iteration, the index will be 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Let's just do a console log of index also. What we'll do is we'll do console.log. Index will be index, and item will be the item. Now, if you see, you get index 0, item 1, index 1, item 2, index 2, item 3. So basically, this function will run for every item within the array, and we can have access to both the item as well as the index. We can use this to do whatever we want with the array. Okay, like let's say I just want to do a console.log of the item into 2. We are multiplying every item with 2 here. So for each is just one more way for you to loop through the array. And it will start with the first index and end at the last index automatically. We have access to both the item as well as the index. And we pass it in an anonymous function. And this function is called a callback. And this callback will run for every element within the array. Okay, so just to repeat, the for each function or for each method on the array, it accepts a callback. It accepts only one parameter, which is a callback function. And this callback function will run for every element within the array. Which means first it will run for the first element, and then next this, and then next this, and so on and so forth. It will run for every element within the array. It starts at the beginning of the array and ends at the end of the array automatically. Okay. One more thing we'll do is see. So here we have given the function inside this thing automatically, but we can create a predefined function as well. Like I'll say const, let's do this function double, and it gets the item and index. And I'll just do the same thing here. And I'll give this function here. This is the same thing that I've done. I've no difference between what I wrote before and what I've written here. मैंने यहाँ पर एक separate function define किया है, which I'm giving it here. which means this callback function will be run for every element within the array. Like पहले ये double जो है, this function will run with numbers of 0, which is 1 as the item. Then again we'll run this function with the second index, which is number 2. Again we'll run this function numbers of 3, and so on and so forth. So basically we'll do this until the end of the numbers, which is number 7 तक करेंगे हम लोग. This one function will keep running for every element of the array. That's how a for each loop works. One more way is, again, instead of writing the we'll remove the index here. So this is a function statement. So let's convert this into a function expression, which is const double is equal to, we'll remove this thing here. This is also the same thing. This is a function expression. Okay, that's how a for each loop works. For each loop accepts the callback function, which will run for every element within the array. Any questions on this, guys?
Sir, will you change the name of item and taken to another name? Can it run?
That is correct. You can make this whatever name you want. Who asked the question, by the way?
Yatin, sir.
So I'll change it to Yatin. Maybe काम करेगा. ठीक है? This name can be anything you want.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, what we should do is, we should give this a meaningful name. Like, let's say, because these are all numbers, right? We can give it a number here. Like this. Let's say if we had an array of strings, const, let's say names will be Aditya, and this. So let's say we have 4 names like this. We can use a for each loop for this also. Let's do names dot for each, and here let's pass it a function like this. And here we can call whatever we want. Let's call it name here, because it makes sense that we always are names, right? So we'll just do console.log of name. We can do all the names like this. Okay, the name, this parameter can be called whatever you want, but it makes more sense to give it a descriptive name. In this case, because we have a names array, I'm just calling it a name here. It can be whatever also. This also will work. Okay, same result. Okay. Now next, what we'll do, we'll work with a little bit of a complex array. Let's create an array of books here, where we'll have multiple objects within the array. So we'll create 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what we have is we have an array here, and we have 4 objects here. Now every object will have a title. Let's say Good Omens, and we'll have the authors. And authors again will be an array of very check, and one more will be gaming. And the last one will be the rating of the book, which is rating will be 4.25. Now same thing we'll create for every other thing also. One second. So this will be, but actually I'll just copy and paste it here, guys. 1 second. I don't want to type out everything. Okay. So I'm just going to paste it here. And now we have an array of objects. So if you see, we have a big array where we have 4 different objects within the array, like this. So every object has a title. That's the author's array. That's the ratings number, which means So every object has a mix of values. This title is basically just a string. The authors is an array of strings, and this is a number. Okay. Now let's see how we can actually. Okay. Now my question. Okay. Now my point is I want to loop through this books array, and I want to print out all the book titles. I want to print out the book titles here. Okay. First, what I want to do, I just want to print out Good Omens and this name and this name and this name, console logs. How do I loop over this and print out the title names only? First, let's try to do it using the for of loop. So let's say for const title of, let's say, book of books. First, let's just do a console log of book here. We'll see what do we get. And we're getting objects here. Now you're telling us what can I do here just to print out the title?
Sir, book.title.
That's it. We do book.title, I get the titles here. Okay, this is how we use it in the for of loop. Like how to do the same thing using the for each loop. Okay, for that we'll do a books ka array jo hai, books.forEach. We pass it a function. The function accepts the book in every iteration. Yahan par again let's do a console log of book again. We'll see what do we get. We get the same thing that we got when we did just book here, no? Which means what do we do here to get the title again?
Sir, dot title.
That's it. We have titles here. Just to reiterate, this is a callback function which will run for every element of the array. Which means in the first iteration, this function will be called by passing in this as the book argument. Next iteration, the same function will be called by passing in this as the book argument. Third time, it will be called by passing this as the book argument. Okay.
सर अगर इसको
No,
थोड़ा सा कॉम्प्लेक्स करना हो तो मींस कि अगर हमें डॉट टाइटल नहीं लगाना, हम इसको इसी तरह से फॉर ईच लगा के फिर उसका इंडेक्स नंबर नहीं सर, उसका इंडेक्स नंबर निकाल के फिर करें तो
मुझे समझ में नहीं आया व्हाट यू ट्राइंग टू से।
सर हम इंडेक्स नंबर का अंदर इंडेक्स नंबर निकाल सकते हैं।
हाँ, यहाँ से निकाल सकते हैं ना, करेक्ट। हाँ,
जैसे अभी इसका इंडेक्स नंबर आया 1 व्हाटएवर जो भी आएगा, सर इंडेक्स नंबर के अंदर इंडेक्स नंबर निकालना हो तो जैसे 0 0.123 0.1 0.2 ऐसे नहीं निकाल सकते?
नहीं वो दैट इज नॉट पॉसिबल विद दिस, नो।
ओके सर,
वो पॉसिबल नहीं है इस पे, ठीक है। Also one more thing is this index can be named anything you want. इसका भी we can keep it IDX, ये भी काम करेगा, whatever you want basically. This is index and this also will work. Okay, this is how it works. Okay, now let's try to do something. I want to print out the first author of every book. What do I do? Console.log में क्या करूँ मैं? I want to print out the first जो भी author है इस पे. I want to print out that.
books dot authors.
Books नहीं ना, book है ना, यहाँ पर book है ना. हाँ.
Book dot author.
But book to author will give me back the array itself, right? लेकिन मुझे तो सिर्फ I want the first person within the array.
Okay sir, first person चाहिए.
हाँ, तो what do we do?
Square bracket.
हाँ.
Sir 0.
That's it. Perfect. ठीक है, उतना ही करना है हमको. This is how you do it using the for each loop. I hope everything's clear in for each before we move on. Any questions on for each, guys?
No sir.
Okay, awesome. Next method we're going to talk about is wait, I'll just comment this out. I'll remove these things. Next हम बात करेंगे map method के बारे में. Now map method जो है ना, once you start using React, you'll be using map all the time. बहुत common है. Probably out of all the array methods, this is the most common array method. Like very common and very popular method. So it's very important to understand what this actually does. So let's say we have a. By the way, आपका Python में भी map method हो गया है क्या? Or still not done?
सर हो गया सर, पाइथन खत्म हो गया।
हाँ तो पाइथन में मैप मेथड आपको सिखाया गया था ना?
जी सर।
हाँ तो ये वही है, एग्जैक्टली वही, नो डिफरेंस एट ऑल। तो जो भी कॉन्सेप्ट आपको मैप मेथड सिखाया गया था पाइथन में, ये भी वही है। Okay, we'll talk about this again though. Now, let's say const numbers will be 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27. We have these numbers here. What I want to do is I'll just create. Okay, now what I want is I want to loop through this array, and I want to create a new array where every element of the new array will be double that of the numbers in this array. To make it even simpler, let's just make it like 10, 20, 30. Okay, we'll just go with 3 numbers for now. मुझे क्या चाहिए? I want a new array which will basically be double of every digit in the array, which means this will be 20, 40, and 60. Okay. I want a new array which has these values. For that, all I have to do is I have to just do numbers.map. Numbers.map also, just like we have the for each, it also accepts a function as a callback. It accepts a callback, which again, this also gets the same thing like for each. This also gets the item. Let's call it number. Okay. We'll just do a console.log of number for now. Okay, let's see what we get 10, 20, 30, which means dot map is also looping over this thing, just like for each. Doesn't it look like for each? Like let's say, okay, let's remove this thing. Now I'll do the same thing with for each now. We get in the same thing in dono ka exactly same. So what is the difference between them both? Difference is dot map will return to you a new array based on whatever you return inside this function. Like let's say you return number into 2, this will be added to a new array. It's a new numbers. Okay, numbers.map always returns to you a new array, and that new array will have the values based on whatever you return here, which means the first index will have number into 2, which is 10 into 2, and the next iteration will be returning 20 into 2, and third iteration will be returning 30 into 2. And this time if you do a console.log of new numbers, we get back 20, 40, and 60. Because what happens is, in the first iteration, number is actually what? It's 10. And then we're doing number into 2, which means we're doing 10 into 2. This 10 into 2 will be stored as the first item within the array. Next iteration will be doing number will be 20, and this will be stored as the second item within the array. And in the third iteration, 30 hoga ye wala, I will be storing 30 into 2 as the third item within the array. Basically, we'll be creating a new array where every element will be whatever is returned here. We get back this new arrays here. So any questions on this one, how it works?
No, sir.
Okay, now one more way we can use numbers is, let's say I want to do numbers.map. I get a, so I have a function here again. We give a number, and here we return an object for every. Okay, basically I want to return an array which has multiple objects within it. where I'm saying कि I'll return this object called value, where value is just this number itself, and is even property क्या होगा, number modulo 2 triple equal to 0, and this will give me back a new array, which if I do a console.log of this array, let's see what we get. We get back an array with multiple objects where I'm getting these values, which means this is a new array that we have built out based on the existing array, where I'm passing in an object for every item within the array. All I'm doing here is, see, अभी क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पर? This function, just like for each, will be called for every item within the array, right? And whatever I return from that array, I mean, from the function, that will be added to the new array. Like, let's say if I just return, let's say 20, then everything will be 20 here. Because what I'm doing is I'm creating a new array based on the new this one, but I'm passing just 20, which means every item within the array will be 20. If I return, let's say, a string here, hey, we get all his. If I return an object here, like name will be like this, I'm getting an array of objects like this. But what I'm going to create now is basically this object called value will be the number, and is even will be number modulo 2 triple equal to 0, like this. Okay, basically you can return whatever you want from the map function, and that will be added as items within the new array. Okay, now we'll use the same concept, whatever we have learned about map, we'll use that to work on this array again. You know what I want is, I want a new array which has all the titles of every book. Basically, I want to return an array like this, which has these titles only. Pele will have this, and next we'll have this as the title. And then next we'll have this. Next we'll have this. So I want to return a new array like this based on this books array. Let's see how we can do it. We'll say const titles is equal to books.map. We get a book in every function here. Okay. And what do we do here? Because what do you think we should do here?
सर क्या समझ नहीं आया, मतलब क्या करना क्या?
We have the books array, right?
Yes sir.
Books array पे map करके I want a new array which contains the titles of the books. जो भी titles है यहाँ पर मुझे वो return करना है एक नया array में. This should be the result. If you look at this, should be the result ultimately. If I just do, let's say, return of 10, अभी क्या आएगा मुझे? If I do, then what will be the console log of titles now?
10.
It will be all 10s.
Yes.
But now I want to return the titles of the books here. What can I return from this?
Sir, book.title लिख देंगे.
That's it. Book.title. This will return to us all the titles of the books. Like this. If I want the ratings of all the books within the array, I'll do const ratings is equal to books.map. We get the book in every iteration here. And here we'll just return the book.rating. This ratings, if I pass is a console log, we get back the ratings here. Just remember that the map function will run this callback on every item within the array, and whatever you return, that will be added as items within the new array. Dot map is used to loop over an array and return to you a new array. That's what the dot map is used for. Let's do more examples just to get more clarity now. I will comment this out again. Let's say we have some numbers. Const numbers is equal to 10, 11, 12, and 13. I want to basically return a new array where every item within the array will be a Boolean value based on these. अगर ये even है तो I'll return true. अगर ये odd है तो I'll return false. So true, false. ये चाहिए मुझे. Based on this array, I want to return a new array where if the number is even, then return true. If the number is odd, then return a false value. This also we can use during using map. Const even are even numbers, and we'll do numbers dot map. We take a number and we return the number modulo 2 triple equal to 0. And this, if I do a console.log of r even numbers, I get the value here. Basically, what's happening here is that this will return to us a Boolean value, right? ये हमेशा हमको Boolean value देगा. It give us either true or a false value. Now this function will run on every element, and this is what will be returned on every element within the array. That's how map works. Map is basically used to return to you a new array based on the existing array. Whatever you return from the array, from the function, that will be returned as an element of the array. Okay, that is why if you just need to like loop through an array, then use for each. But if you need to loop through an array, modify that array and give back a new array, then use dot map. One more important thing here is that dot map does not modify the original array at all. It will only return to you a new array, but does not modify the existing array at all. Okay, that's how the map works. Any questions on map, guys?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, before we move to other array methods, let's talk about one important topic called arrow functions. Now, arrow functions are very similar to the lambda functions in Python, where arrow functions are used. I mean, they're used to help us to write like much shorter syntax for functions. So let's see how that works. First, let's create a non-arrow function expression, which means a normal function expression. So let's create a function called square, which will basically be a function x, and we return x ka square like this. This is a normal function expression which we've already seen. But if we convert this to an arrow function now, see, arrow function, first of all, the purpose of arrow function is it is used to reduce the syntax of a function. It's used to write much shorter syntax for functions. 1 second. So that's what. So arrow functions are just used to write a much shorter syntax for functions. Let's see how we can convert the same thing to an arrow function now. So we'll say const square is equal to, now we'll copy this I mean, to convert this into an arrow function, first of all, remove the function keyword, and uske baad just add an arrow here. That's it. That is how you convert a function to an arrow function. Okay, you remove the function keyword, and before the curly braces will start, add an arrow like this. And this and this are exactly the same. There are some small differences which we'll look into later on. But for now, you can think of these both are exactly the same. The difference, if you can say, is this has like more like longer syntax than this, and this looks way more like cleaner and shorter. And also, arrow functions are something which have come up later on. ES6 ke baad aaya hai. And this is an older way of adding functions. This is a newer way of adding functions. And if you look at any modern code bases, you will see that people have been using this only. Okay, this is how you write an arrow function here.
इसकी एक तो और एग्जांपल देना.
हाँ, yeah. Okay, we will go with many examples. One more example is, let's say we have a function called greet. The console.log of hi mom. Okay, this is a function statement. When we convert this to a function expression, we'll say const greet is equal to like this, console.log of same thing. Okay. If we convert this to an arrow function, we first of all remove the function keyword and we add the arrow here. That's it. Now we can call the same function like this. We get hi mom here. These three things do the same exact thing. No difference actually. I mean, there are some small differences internally, which we'll talk about later when we talk about more advanced stuff. But the way they work is absolutely the same. Okay, this is how an arrow function works. Now, what if you have multiple arguments? You can pass the arguments here, like let's say X and Y, and you can add the names here. Like this, and you can add this parameters here. Get the names here. Okay. And thing is, if you have just one argument, you can pass it like this.
Sir, how to print array? Arrow?
So I'll tell you. So look at this thing here. You have to first hit equal to and greater than symbol.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, my font is a little different here because I have downloaded a different font. Again, it looks like this. It might look like this in your VS Code. I will type it out here to show. Equal to it's basically you have to use an equal to and greater than symbol. Okay. Now coming back to our JavaScript stuff. So so this is an arrow function again. So what else is there? Arrow function. What else? No, let's say in case we have a function, we just return something. Like let's say it returns function sum a comma b, and we return a plus b. Okay. Again, this can be considered a function expression by doing const sum is equal to a comma b and return this. Okay, this both are the same again. But let me do this. If I convert this to an arrow function, I'll just remove the function and add the arrow here. And I'll do a const result is equal to sum and 10 on 20. I'll console log result. Get back 30 here. Now thing is, see when you have an arrow function, one more advantage with that is if all you're doing within your function body is returning something and nothing else, अगर तुम एक arrow function के body में सिर्फ return कर रहे हो, nothing else you're doing, then you do not even need to use a return keyword, and you don't even need to use this curly braces, which means I can just do, I'll remove the curly braces first, I'll remove the return keyword like this and just return it like this. Now just compare this to what we have here. You see how much simpler and smaller the syntax is. Now this and this are exactly the same. They provide the same result, but this is much shorter. Okay, so only when if all you're doing is just returning something from an arrow function, then you do not need to use a return keyword at all. But let's say if you're adding some other code, maybe you're doing console.log of something, and then you're returning a plus b, then you cannot use the shorter syntax. You cannot, you have to use the curly braces example. Curly braces must be used because you have something other than return keyword, which is this. But if all you have is a return statement, then you can just remove the curly braces and remove the return keyword like this.
Okay, sir.
One more example is, let's create a function called isEven. Function name should be isEven, which accepts a parameter, which is a number, and returns to you a Boolean, true or false. If the number is even, then return true. The number is false, return false. So first we create a simple function again, isEven, and what you do is you just return. We get a number here, so we return this number modulo to triple equal to 0. We return this. Let's convert this. Let's convert this into a function expression. So we'll do const isEven will be a function like this. Let's convert this into an arrow function now. We will do this, just remove this and remove this. Okay, let's convert this into an arrow function without the return keyword. Like this, we'll comment this out and we'll remove the return keyword, we'll remove this and this also. We get this. Okay, now let's say if you want to return just a simple value, a function which returns anything, this returns maybe some value of 2. Okay, we'll convert this directly into an arrow function without the return keyword. Okay, so we'll say const return anything will be an arrow function which returns value of 2. We'll comment this out and we'll call the function like this, return anything, and we call it and we get by the value of 2 here. Okay, this is an arrow function which doesn't accept any parameters and it just returns value of 2. We can return a string also if you want, like this, and we can return, let's say, null, or we can return undefined. We can return an array also of numbers. Okay, we can return whatever we want without the return keyword. But what if you want to return an object? You might think that we just have to add the object directly like this, like name is equal to object here, but this will actually not work. Because see, when you're using the curly braces for an arrow function, it thinks of it as a function body. So function body samjhega wo. So if you want to return an object from an arrow function, you have 2 ways. The first way is use the return keyword again, like this. Or if you still do not want to use the return keyword, then just get rid of this. And what we do is we wrap this with a normal parenthesis like this. Okay, we add a normal parenthesis and then we add the object inside the parenthesis. Then it will consider this to be an object. Okay, but this will not work. Like if I just do this, this will not work. ये काम नहीं करेगा because arrow function will consider this to be a function body. Again, we want to consider this to be an object. And so use the parenthesis like this. Okay. So any questions about arrow functions?
No, sir.
Okay. Now we'll replace the map thing, whatever we did, using an arrow function now. Okay. And that is where arrow function actually will shine. So we'll say const titles is equal to books.map. We'll write the function again. We'll say book. We'll return book.title. And we console.log of titles. We get this titles here. But this time, what I'll do, instead of doing this, I will actually use the arrow function, which is this. We get the same result. Again, if you look at this, again, we have just a return keyword and nothing else, which means we can further shorten the code by removing the return keyword and removing the curly braces like this. And removing the semicolon also. This thing like this. So this and this are absolutely the same stuff. No difference at all here. Okay. Now what I want you guys to do is actually go back and practice the arrow functions very, very thoroughly. See, so far we have discussed about the dot map and for each, right? So, right, I mean, you guys create arrays and arrays of objects on your own and just keep practicing with the arrow functions a lot because you will be using arrow functions all the time. Especially whenever you're writing callback function, always use an arrow function because it's much more simpler to read and write. Compare this to this. This looks way simpler and smaller, right? Okay, that's for you.
सर जो एरो फंक्शन है, जैसे मैंने फंक्शन लिखा उसके आगे मैंने फंक्शन का नेम लिखा, तो हर बार मुझको फंक्शन कैंसिल करके फंक्शन के नेम के आगे एरो फंक्शन लगाना पड़ेगा, एरो लगाना पड़ेगा. क्या हम उसको कहीं ऐसे यूज नहीं कर सकते जैसे बुक्स डॉट मैप लिखा, इधर कहीं ऐसे यूज नहीं कर सकते एरो फंक्शन को? मींस यहाँ फंक्शन लिखा होगा उसी को हमने रिप्लेस कर देना है.
नहीं. See, I'll do it without any of that. Okay, so I'll be like const ratings is equal to books.ratings. Sorry, books.map. I get the book. I'll be like book.rating. मुझे आ गया ये वाला. So I do not have to write rather than remove. Directly right. One more thing is if I want, I can create a callback function which is just this. ये cut करके यहाँ पर paste करता हूँ. I paste this here. Same thing.
Okay, sir.
Got it, no?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, before we end the class,
sir, which function are you mostly use and which function are rarely?
Good question. So really, there's no particular answer for that. But honestly, if you take my suggestion, I would say just go ahead and use the arrow functions because first of all, arrow functions are the most modern way to write the functions, and secondly, arrow functions are a lot nicer and cleaner and shorter and simple to read, which means this is the most common one nowadays. But you'll still see people using the normal functions, which is this. This also a lot of people still use this, but इसका popularity बहुत घट रहा है इसका, and इसका popularity बहुत rise हो रहा है. So going forward, just write this all the time. ठीक है?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Any more questions, guys?
No, sir.
Okay, so I think we'll stop the class here. But if you guys want, we can go on for more half an hour. What do you guys think? I'll leave it to you guys to decide. You stop or do you want to continue?
Continue, sir.
Okay, done. Next, we will talk about another function called the find function. Okay, next we'll talk about the find function. Now, so let's say we have movies here, const movies. Fantastic, Mr. Fox. The next is Mrs. Smith. We have this 4 movies here. Now, if I want to find out the first movie that includes Mrs. in it. Okay, if you look at these movies, we have Mr. here, we have Mr., Mrs. here, and all of that. So I want to return the first movie within this array that includes Mrs. in its title. Okay, for that you can use whenever you want to find anything within an array, you can use the dot find method. It works like this. So movies dot find. Again, just like how we have the map and for each, you have the same signature again, which means you get the movie here. Let's so here whatever you return, right? Whatever condition you return here, if the condition is met by any of the movie, then that movie will be returned. Like let's say return movie dot includes of Mrs. And this I'll store in a result. I'll console log the result here. We get Mr. Mrs. Smith. So even though Mrs. was there in 2 of these places, what we are saying is whatever the first movie you find, which meets this condition, is return to me that movie. What dot find will do is it will run this thing for every element of the array, and once it finds any movie which matches this criteria, that movie will be returned and you do not loop in any further. Okay, which means it breaks out of the loop once this condition is met. Which means as soon as this condition is met, dot find will loop over this. Now let's try to add one more condition here. Let's say I want to add I want to find out the movie which starts with the letter THE. Okay, there is a method called starts with, and we can say the here. We get back the first answer. Let me repeat again what dot find does. Dot find will run this callback on every element of the array until it finds an element which matches this criteria. Once it finds an element which matches this criteria, it breaks out of the loop and returns that answer. Which means whatever the first value it gets, it just returns that to us. Okay. Now we'll talk about this array of objects again. Okay, now let's check. I want to return the object or the item within the array which has the title of Good Omens. Okay, I want to find the book within the books array which has the title of Good Omens. What we'll do here again, const result is equal to books.find of the function, and we get back the book here, and we return book.title is equal to Good Omens. This. Now, if we do a console.log of result, we get back this object itself. Okay, because dot find kya karta hai? It loop over the books array until it finds that book which matches this criteria. Once the criteria is matched, then it returns that book to you.
Sir.
Yes.
सर बुक डॉट स्टार्ट विद करेंगे और उसके बीच में हम बुक लगा देंगे तो सारे बुक्स के जितने भी फर्स्ट नाम होगा वो सारा आ जाएगा।
हाँ नहीं, so dot find will always return to you one element, and whatever the first one it finds will return only that, not all the elements. It returns to you only the first element that it finds, not all the elements.
Okay, sir.
So for example, let's say book dot starts with, starts with, and we'll say, okay, we'll put A, okay, because A is there both of these. So I'll say starts with A. Sorry, I have to say book dot title dot starts with. We get back the first result that we get back, American Gods. Even though both of these books match this criteria, we're returning only the first result that we get. It is this one. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's how the dot find works. Now, whatever you said, Rajinder, like what if I want to return all the books which have which are meeting this criteria? Very simple, just replace dot find with dot filter. Dot filter will do the same thing that dot find does, except that whatever whichever items match this criteria, all of them will be returned. Which means in our case, both of these will be returned. Basically, dot filter and dot find are exactly the same. The only difference is dot find will return to you just the first element it finds, whereas dot filter will return to you a new array which has a result of all of these things. So whatever items match this criteria, they'll be returned within the array. That is dot filter. We'll talk about dot filter in detail now. So I'll remove all of this and I'll create an array again called const nums is equal to 3435. 39 and 40. We have these numbers. Now, if I want to print all the odds, just the odd numbers I want within an array, I want to loop through this array and return only the numbers that are odd numbers within the array. Okay, we can use dot filter here. So nums dot filter. You take the number and you return only if number percentile to triple equal to 0. And if you print out the odds value here, we get back just the odd numbers. And by the way, I've been forgetting to convert these functions into arrow functions. Let's do that now. I'll convert this into an arrow function by doing, I'll remove the function and add the arrow function here, and remove the return keyword here as well. Like this. Okay. Now going forward, I'll only be using arrow functions. So we'll say const events is numbers or nums dot filter. Or if you take the number, oh, by the way, I'm sorry, odds should actually be
not equal to 0.
1. And this should be number percentile to triple equal to 0. So numbers, sorry. And here, if you do console.log of events, we get events here, we get odds here. Let's say I want to find out all the numbers which are greater than 37. So I'll say const greater than 37 nums dot filter. Take the number, only return it if the number is greater than 37. So I'll do console.log of this also. I get only these 2 numbers here. Dot filter क्या करता है कि it will go through the it will go through the entire array, and whichever item within the array meets this condition, that will be filtered out and added to the new array. Let me repeat that. So dot filter will loop through the entire array, and whichever item meets this condition, that item will be added to the new array. It basically filters out the original array. Okay, that's how it works. Now we'll do the same. One last thing we'll do with this books ka array, right? So this books ka array, what I want to do, I want to get back all ones. Yeah. So I want to return all the books within a new array which have a rating of 4.25 or above. What I can do is I'll do const above 4.25. I'll do a books dot filter. I'll take a book. I'll say book dot rating must be greater than or equal to 4.25. I'll do a console.log of above 425. I get back these three objects, and all of these have a rating more than 4.25 or equal to 4.25. Dot filter also extremely useful. See, when do you use the dot filter is based on the original array. You want to filter out the original array and give a new array, then use dot filter. Okay. Use dot filter when you want to filter out the original array and return a new array. Then use dot filter. Okay, so we have two other methods left, and then we'll be done with all the array methods. And there are many others, but these are the most common ones. So again, I will just comment this out. So what we'll do is I'll create superheroes array. We have these superheroes. Now what I want to do is I want to loop through superheroes array, and if there is a Thor within the array, then return true, else return false. Very simple. So if the superheroes array contains Thor in it, then return true or return false. Basically, I just need to return a Boolean value. For that, I can use a dot sum method. So I'll say superheroes dot sum. I'll take the hero, and I'm saying hero is equal to Thor. And then we'll see what result we get. We say const result is equal to this, and console.log of result with the value of true. Now, what the dot sum does is, whatever condition we have passed, even if one of them is true, even if one of the element satisfies this condition, then overall we give a result of true. Also, dot sum kya karta hai ki once it finds an element which matches this condition, then it returns to a value of true and it exits the looping itself. It doesn't loop any further. It short circuits the looping. And let's repeat it. So basically, see, dot sum kya karta hai ki it loops through the array and it tries to find at least one element which matches this condition. Once it finds an element which matches this condition, it will just return to you a value of true and it will stop the execution of the array. Dot sum, isko sirf ek item chahiye which matches the condition, not every item. And even if it finds one item which matches the condition, then returns value of true. Else it returns value false. Let's say I add Spider-Man here. We get false here because there is nothing called Spider-Man within the array. But let's say we change back to Thor again, we get a value of true. Now the opposite of dot sum is dot every. What dot every does is only if every element of that array matches the condition, then it returns the value of true, else it will be false. What I mean by that is if I change this to every, right? Every, we get false here because what dot every does is every element of the array must meet this condition. Only then the overall result will be true, or else it will be false. Now let's try changing everything to Thor. Thor. Like this. Now it will be true because every element matches this condition. But even if one of them doesn't match condition, let's say one of them is something else, then it will be false again. Which means dot every, like the name suggests, name mein hai na every bolte. So every kya karta hai ki only if every element matches this condition, then it will be true overall, else it will be false overall. Okay, that's how it works. So any questions here, guys?
No, sir.
Okay, then I'm done for my class for today.
Yes,
I'll
sir.
see you next week and have a good weekend, guys.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.